Greetings, everybody. As you can see, we're not broadcasting from our regular location because well, someone's using that room right now. So I'm broadcasting from my dining room, which still has the way that we decorated it for Purim, but we so agree with the decorations that we're not taking them down. So you see, we had. Matt Gaetz and DeSantis and Donald Trump, all from the great state of Florida currently, where the Jewish world is probably going to have to run to get out of New York and New Jersey and Maryland as quick as our legs can carry us. And of course, all the way up, you see it, we had a little Russian Shemayim. Yeah, just sharing our Purim decorations with you. Um, they're so pretty. We're not taking them down just because Purim passed. Anyways, we are continuing now with Guf and Neshama and Parshas Hashavua. And this week is probably one of the most central weeks on this topic. Luchos abris. What do you do with luchos? What was their function? I understand the Sefer Torah. It's got the whole Chumash. Luchos only had the Aseret HaDibros in it. What do you do with luchos, especially made out of that heavy stone? It's not exactly something it's easy to dance with on Simchas Torah. We weren't supposed to dance with it at all. What did the luchos represent? And this is exactly the point. The luchos represent the human heart, literally, physical heart. And this is what my Rebbe Moshe Shapir used to always tell us in cheer. The pasuk says, "Kosveim al luchos libecha." Inscribe them on the tablets of your heart. And he says that's why we always found that Am Yisrael drew the luchos, with these two loops on top. Kind of looks like a heart. Even though no sheet in the Medrash says that the luchos look that way. And he insisted that nothing to do with Michelangelo, nothing to do with that, nothing to do with the Italian Christian art, as Jews always drew luchos that way because it represents the human heart. But literally, the human heart. Heart that we have in our body, right? And we have to inscribe on our hearts, like the pasuk says in creation, have the words of Torah on your heart. We're supposed to inscribe our hearts with the words of Torah. And we know that the Aseret HaDibros, which we heard on Shavuos, it's called that we got the whole Torah. Why? We only got those the 14 mitzvahs or so that there are in the 10 Dibros, because all the Rishonim have agreed that the 10 Dibros allude to all the 613. Those 14 some odd mitzvahs that are included in those 10 utterances are inclusive mitzvahs that in principle are inclusive of many more mitzvahs, and the Rishonim will each one have their own way of showing how the Aseret allude to all Taryag mitzvahs. So it's like the 10 Dibros are a capsule of the entirety of the Torah. That's why when we only got the 10 Dibros, it was called Chag Matan Torah Seinu. You got the whole Torah in capsule form. And the details were taught over the next 40 years in the desert. So, the Luchos was a Guf Neshama model. It was, how we have the words of Torah, which are, call it, kind of natural for Neshama. Even for the Neshama, it's a gift, right? Hashem gifted us the Torah, but the angels wanted. Hashem says, no, mankind gets it, but it's kind of on the par for the Neshama, kind of, and we're going to learn in our Guf and Neshama series that you learn Torah with your Neshama, not with your brain. The biochemical brain can't understand Torah, spiritually. It can only understand like the external raw data, but to tap into the spirit of Torah, the infinite depth of Torah, only the Neshama that influences the mind can unlock that. You learn Torah with a neshama, as we will explain further in the big series on Kuf and Neshama. Right. So the words of Torah are kind of on par with the neshama and have to be engraved on our hearts of stone. Now take a look. Is well known that before the sin of Adam, the body was a lot holier than it is now. Was only a little bit lagging, only a little bit behind the neshama. Right. The proof is the body was in Gan Eden before the sin. Oh, and Gan Eden is where we can only go now after we're dead. It's that spiritual that our current body can't go there. And the words of Ramchal, Adam's body before the sin was like our soul is now. That's why he lived in Gan Eden. When he went down a level, he got ejected from Gan Eden. Can't live there anymore because it's too spiritual of a place, right? So now by Matan Torah, we went back briefly to the level like Adam before the sin. And the first luchos that we got, luchos Maisel Elokim Hema, Michtav Elokim Choros Luchos. The luchos were called, a creation of God. Maisel Elokim, and the writing was the writing of God engraved on the luchos, firmly engraved and unified. That was our state before the sin of the golden calf that sadly happens in Parsha. The body was also divine, just like the body. So also in the first luchos, the stone was divine. It wasn't really stone. It was Maisel Elokim. It wasn't earthly stone. And so you can read that the level of the first luchos was like the tablet, which wasn't a physical tablet, it was Maisel Elokim, was only millimeters lagging behind the writing inscribed on the tablet. Like the body was so close to the level of the soul. It was a state of virtual total integration, like Adam before the sin. Like Adam, unfortunately, he had to do one more thing, to have his body and soul totally integrated. We also are on a similar level of just having to do, keep the Torah, accept the Torah, and we would have the total and absolute integration, right? The body was that close to the soul. It was a wonderful Maisel Kim and Michel Kim and Chorus Aluchos, engraved. Engraving is when the writing and the tablet that carries it are one. It's internalized. That was the state of the first luchos, right? That was the state that we were on. We failed. And because the golden calf was like redoing the sin of Adam, and we went down in level. And we were unworthy of those first luchos, and that's why Moshe broke them. Moshe was congratulated by God for breaking them because it would be incongruent to where we are. If the luchos are supposed to be like a model of where Am Yisrael was vis-a-vis their integration with Torah, which also runs parallel to their integration of body and soul, right? If that's what's supposed to be, it's now incongruent. The model doesn't fit the reality it's supposed to reflect. So the luchos had to be broken. Right? And we had to and when we did tshuva, we weren't worthy of any luchos. Then Moshe begged for us, went up to Shamayim and got us the second luchos. And the second luchos, express exactly where we are. It was earthly stone, the second luchos. Earthly stone from here, from earth. And v'chasavti, and even though perhaps it was engraved, but it doesn't put the emphasis on engraving. I will write on the luchos, right? You could read it as if it was just like ink. It wasn't internalized the way engraving is. Because even if that's the way it was, the Torah doesn't stress that. It says, and I will write on the luchos. And it represents our current heart of stone, and we have a much greater challenge of integration. Because it's earthly stone, not Maisel Elokim. Earthly stone to try to synthesize that with the words of the Torah, which are, the Neshama can understand. And that, big gap between us and the Torah is also a big gap between our bodies and souls. Right? So now, it's amazing, it's also Parshas Parah. Now, Parshas Parah, which takes off the impurity of death, which we have because of the incongruence of body and soul. That's why they are gone apart. Eventually, they'll be reunited by resurrection, but because of the great gap between them, the body is not immortal, and they're destined to part until they could be reunited on a higher form. The body will be purified. right? As we'll all explain in the big series, right? So we wouldn't have died if not for sin of the golden calf. The golden calf brought back death, just like Adam would have not died if not eaten from the tree of knowledge. Tree of knowledge brought death. So now, because we have death, we have impurity of the death. Impurity of death gets taken off with paraduma, which means that paraduma restores us somewhat to the level we were on. So the amazing thing about paraduma, right? Two things that when one reads the Chazals, the drushes on the Psukim of Paraduma, there are all types of remuzim of how you have to learn hard. You have to kill yourself learning. Why is that necessary? Because the body really lags behind. The biochemical consciousness is way, way, way behind the intelligence of the neshama. That's why you have to really toil. Amelus, you got to stretch yourself. Chazal say, learning it from the Psukim Paraduma, Yamis Asazal, you have to kill yourself learning, right? To be Zochar, you have to get past the body. The body lags so far behind. So it's like the toil of learning is called killing yourself in learning, right? The toil, the Amelos, called killing. You got to get past the body because the body is so far behind the soul. So it has to be stretched to the limit, called that's virtually to the point of death. That's how hard you have to learn. Right. And so now Paradu, which represents, a little bit of a restoration of getting past death that we brought about to ourselves because of the schism between body and soul. It's a mystical mitzvah that we don't understand. But Chazal say Moshe understood it. To Moshe, Paradu made perfect sense. And now understand how this is all parallel. Right. We didn't keep the faith. We had a question. We thought that Moshe should be back by now. As the word, people must have said, follow the science, right? It's 6 hours already, Moshe's not coming back, right? Because even if the body was on a very high level, it still wasn't perfect like the soul, and they miscalculated. That's what we have faith for. Of course, we want reason. We have faith, and we have emuna, and we have to build those emuna muscles in recognition, that our biochemical intelligence is limited, and we can have questions that aren't really questions. We can have doubts that aren't really doubts. And that's why you have to keep the faith, because the biochemical mind is faulted. And you got to keep the faith and not immediately dump things the minute you get confused. Now, the neshama has das. The neshama has knowledge, but the neshama really has knowledge. It really perceives things as they truly are. And you have to understand, das is for what we get from the neshama, and Muna is what we need for the guf. And the Jews were challenged. They had a doubt, which obviously came from the biochemical consciousness, and they should have kept the faith, like the women did. I'm going to have yet in our series. We're talking about male and female, gender specific, right? We're talking about these things now, and we're going to see that women who are more like the body, as we'll be learning now, right now, currently in the big series, right? So women have more emuna than men, right? And that's why they didn't succumb by the cheda ego, and that's why by them Rosh Chodesh is a Yom Tov, as is well known. As so, mamish parallel to what we're learning right now in our big series. Man kind of like neshama, woman kind of like guf in the relative to each other. Women have more emuna, right? And that's emuna is what the guf needs, because as a countermeasure to recognizing that the biochemical consciousness is faulted, right? And that's it. You want proof? Look at what's been going on for last year. Everyone says follow the science. Well, what's the science? Science was initially no mass, and now it's up to 2 mass. And then follow the science and open up, says one state and all their doctors. And follow science and keep states closed. Follow science, get the kids back to school. The virus is not dangerous to them. Follow the science, keep the schools closed. Follow the science, right? No one needs a great, and follow the science. And those same people say, but go to the George Floyd protest. The virus doesn't go there. And 1,500 medical professionals signed off on that. Follow the science. There's no greater proof of what we're going through right now of how faulted, the biochemical intelligence is, to follow the science. And that's what you need emuna for. The neshama has das, right? So now with the mitzvah of Paradum, which is to restore us to that higher level, we eat a piece of humble pie. You don't understand what's going on here, right? Because you went down in level, and your whole biochemistry went down in Madrega, so your biochemical intelligence went down. And look at Paradum, you're mystified. Moshe didn't go down in Madrega because he wasn't involved in the sin of the golden calf. He wasn't even on earth when it happened. To him, Paradum makes perfect sense. It says, to you, Lachani Megalatame Par, you much I'm going to reveal all the secrets of Paradum. Even Shlomo didn't understand Paradum. Moshe did. He's called Isha Elokim, the man of God. And the Nefesh Chaim explains his body and soul were in perfect sync. He didn't lose the original level. That's why it's called Isha Elokim. That's why even his as we read this week's Parsha, his face projected light, shines. Right? That's how pure his body was. And the Neshama was able to shine through his body. He only died because God commanded him to die. The Torah attests to the fact that at 120 years old, he was in perfect shape. His body was elevated and in sync with his neshama. He died because God commanded him to die. Really, right? But on the other hand, Moshe doesn't need emunah. Moshe knows there's a God. Moshe has das Torah. So of course we want das. We want the das of the Torah. And das Torah does not fit naturally on the biochemical mind. And the biochemical mind needs emunah to cope. Right? And we strive, and only through amelus batera, only when we stretch ourselves and really stretch, not the way things look in the biochemical mind at first glance. That's always wrong. The Havamina of the Gemara always rejects the first idea. Havamina. No, as the Gemara is teaching you, you never can zero in on the truth straight ahead with this biochemical machine. Right? It's too faulted. It's only when you stretch it and then the Neshama shines, you zoch a little bit of das Torah. Das, but from Torah, not the das of the biochemical mind is unreliable, and therefore we need emunah, right? But on the other hand, Moshe's strength is his weakness, because at the end of 40 years, right, he's giving the nation water, and the nation, he gets a little bit angry with them, and he hits the rock instead of talking to it. So Hashem says, Yan lohem mantembi, because you didn't believe, you don't have emunah me, you're not taking the Jewish people into the land of Israel. So Sfasem, that wouldn't mean Moshe didn't believe in God. He speaks to God. He had the highest level of prophecy anyone ever had. So no, that's the point that Hashem was telling him. You need emunah to be on the level of this generation. This is a generation of emunah. You're not in sync with them. You're das. This is the Sfasem says. You're das. That's why you understand Parah Aduma. You have a pure flesh, that a pure body that's in sync with the Neshama. You're Ish Elokim. And to you, Parah Aduma makes as much sense as Baba Kama, Baba Mitzia, and Baba Basra. There's no difference to you because your Neshama shines through your body and fully inhabits your mind, right? You cannot be the leader of this generation because there's an incongruence between you and them. They need a leader that has emunah. Right? There's all Sfasemis, now we have a strict time limit on this session, so I can't go into this deeper. You could message me privately, and I'll happy to explain this more. But this is the point. This parsha, it discusses the rise and fall of how our bodies and souls were once very close. The first luchas, where even the stone was divine, it only lagged slightly lower in Madrega than the writing, versus what we became, earthly stone, and still heavenly words. And it's a very big gap to bridge, but it's doable. It's doable. You have to grind the stone. You got to grind and grind away. The words of Torah on that heart of stone. Right? And we got to learn a lesson that, we have to recognize the faults of the biochemical intelligence and work on our emunah muscles. We can't expect with biochemical intelligence to have the perfect rational answer for everything. That's what we need faith for. We aspire for das, and that das, the real perception of reality, comes from das Torah. But for us to bridge that gap, you need amelus Torah. You got to strive, which is all alluded to in the Tzukim by Parah Aduma of Zosa Torah Adam Kiasvel Shiyamis Atzmo Ba'al Torah. This is what we wanted to share for this week. Have a wonderful Shabbat.